The accident happened at the Muswellbrook No. 2 underground mine, a small shaft cut into the seam of one of the area's original open cuts. The trapped man was underground with a maintenance crew and was in a mine vehicle when a 2-metre section of roof collapsed on him. When the alarm went out, paramedics and ambulance crews rushed to the pit head, but all they could do was wait. Mine workers had to be called in from their annual holidays to go underground. Like most mine accidents, the scene on the surface gave little indication of the desperate work being carried out below. The rescue workers faced at least 5 hours of digging to reach the crushed vehicle.
Starter's gun was fired, all eyes were on Michelle. The crew got crossed up after the first wave hit them, almost losing Michelle, who had only moved to the coast 2 years ago from the country where the roughest water she'd been in was a river. However, the Newcastle surf today was more like a rapid for the Tea Gardens youngsters as they wash back onto the crew from Stockton and Michelle goes over. A quick leap aboard in unladylike fashion and it's away again. The brave young lady was again in trouble as she heads for the beach. The crew miss a wave, but the next one stands high above them. Breaking right onto the head of Michelle. But in the true tradition of the sea captain, Michelle stays aboard to the cheers of the big crowd. Once ashore, it was all smiles as she explains the feeling of this history-making surf race. How difficult was it for you?
I'm tired. The crew did very well though because we got into a few sticky situations and they got us out real well.
What about going out? You had a little bit of difficulty in the break?
A lot.
What was the feeling when that wave was hanging over your head?
I was just hoping to get us all back so we wouldn't get hurt.
Well, you've realised you're the only lady sweeping boats in Australia.
No.
Well, everything is political in the United States. I had a shot with San Diego supposedly, and at the last minute they called and told me that they couldn't afford to pay my accommodation, which I thought was a bit unreasonable, but I'm fortunate enough to be back here in Newcastle and try and bring a championship here.
How do you see the side of the Newcastle Kern Falcons in 1983?
Well, last year all of us was pretty new, and we missed out of the playoffs by 1 year. I think the addition of Danny Ray Cruz is going to help a great deal, and I think we'll do well.
The return of George Morrow certainly has stimulated a lot of interest in Newcastle basketball followers. One leading question, who's going to be captain of the 1983 Newcastle Kern Falcons? Coach Dennis Kibble.
Dan Riley has been captain for the last 2 years for the Kern Falcons. But this year, because of his natural leadership, and I do believe in that the captain and the call of the game should come from the backcourt, that I have named David Ankeny as the captain of the Kern Falcons for 1983.
It's going to be a very, very strong back three with George Morrow, Donnie Ray Cruz and Dave Ankeny.
I'd say we'll have one of the best backcourts in the league, and whilst we've also got George Morrow, Ian Davies and Mike Johnson in the front court, I believe that our backcourt trio will carry the day for us.
Lovely.
The region's SWOS unit trains more frequently than most other squads of its kind. Today, training was held at Cessnock. In the past 2 years, the squad has expanded. Along with the Newcastle team of 14, there are now special weapons and operations squads stationed at Maitland, Cessnock and Taree. It includes officers from all sections of the police force who are selected on a voluntary basis. Along with shooting practice, the monthly training classes are designed to teach the squad how to handle most situations. great part of their work involves seizures, and recently the squad has had to apply that knowledge.
2 offenders were cornered in a shop at Hamilton, and they made certain threats, and it was felt that the Special Weapons Squad should be called out. They were called out. The operation ended successfully. Fortunately, we had a negotiator. But if there'd been major problems, we had plenty of trained men on hand to cover the situation.
By the way, if you were a member of the SWOS team in Sydney, you'd be supplied with a special black uniform. The Newcastle teams have had to do without. In fact, they buy their own. Lake Macquarie is one area which would be affected by the new planning policy, with more than 50% of the municipality Crown land. The policy, circulated to all councils, is called the Draft State Environmental Planning Scheme for Surplus Public Land. Lake Macquarie Council has already objected to state authorities.
Well, I think the main concern with it, as far as council is concerned, is the reference to the possible release for anyone purchasing or finally finishing up with those lands being available to them without the requirements of council being applied.
Now, this affects quite a lot of land in your municipality.
Yes, there would be a substantial amount of land because the Crown owns more than half of Lake Macquarie. But it would pertain mainly to lands that they see as surplus to that which they have plans for in other directions that can be released for certain uses, possibly not without some justification.
Under the new plan, the Minister for Environment and Planning would have the power to specify the purposes for which the land is used and override zoning restrictions. If the new policy phases out Council's ability to control planning within its area, the draft policy will meet with some strong opposition.
In Gosford, a huge party was held to celebrate the important day. 8 hours jammed with entertainment. It was a real community day. Displays of model-themed trains, Army and Navy exhibitions, and of course live entertainment kept the crowds at Civil Park amused. NBN Sportsman of the Year, Brett Austin, displayed his winning trampoline-style tour and sundress, and the dancers won a number of hearts. The city's party will continue into the night with flags flying and Australian ballads filling the air. Although patriotism was running high, a group of children couldn't resist laying down their flags and picking up this giant ball to play with. But for this little boy, it was all a bit too much. If you have a child in a childcare centre, consider yourself lucky. That's a message from coordinators. Hundreds of parents are on waiting lists to get into this centre at the university. The centre has a cut-off level of 60 children and a waiting list of 260. And as coordinator Lillian Martin explains, they aren't alone in their dilemma.
Most of the children on the waiting list will never actually get into the centre, because when children come here, they rarely leave. There are only 2 other places in Newcastle that do long day care, and there are not nearly enough for the number of children who do need it.
I believe the Commonwealth Government has proposed a new scheme for childcare centres.
The new scheme is in relation to our fee structures. We must start a new system to receive our subsidies, which will make the system more equitable for those who cannot afford to pay the type of fees that we charge now. The new system is more complicated, so causes possibly more problems for the childcare centres in terms of paperwork and administration, but in the end will be fairer for those people who can't afford. Those who can afford will pay, those who can't afford it will pay less.
The Newcastle Occasional Childcare Centre, funded by the federal government and sponsored by the Newcastle City Council, has closed, leaving Newcastle with no inner city temporary care for children.
This is the giant collier Kashima Maru. It's one of the new breed of supertankers which until now were unable to use the port of Newcastle. With the harbour deepening now nearing completion, records for the shipment of coal look set to be broken. When fully loaded, the Kashima Maru will have 102,000 tonnes of coal on board and will draw 15 metres of water. The coal loading is carried out 24 hours a day at a rate of 42 tonnes per minute. The coking and steaming coal is loaded into the holds, which can each hold up to 13,000 tonnes. This load is bound for Japan. It's all been made possible by the Harbour Deepening project, which should be completed this week. The West Ham Resolution has now been taken out of service. Over the years it acted as the vacuum pump, picking up the blasted rock, clay and sand and taking it to offshore dumping grounds. But now she's tied up at the State dockyard for some minor repairs and should go into dry dock next month. The dredge Gumai was working a small section of the channel this morning but should have completed its work by tomorrow. The entrance to the harbour is now 15.5 metres at zero tide, which means that deeper ships will be accepted if the tide is higher. Another improvement to the harbour is the new navigational posts which were erected on Monday. There's some friction between the Newcastle City Council and the Maritime Services Board over the siting of the posts. Today's coal record won't stand for long, however. On the 18th of February, the Orinoco will arrive in the port to load in excess of 120,000 tonnes of Hunter Valley coal.
In the past, these children were thought to be virtually unteachable, but now they are acquiring skills to enable them to be more independent. This glimmer of hope for developmentally disabled people is due to a new scheme, introduced at Stockton Hospital just 7 months ago. It was developed at the University of Oregon by Professor Bud Fredericks and his team. Professor Fredericks lectured in Australia last year, and the staff at Stockton was so impressed with his ideas that a team was sent from America to teach a group of nurses at the hospital the teaching and data techniques involved. Since that time, the program has snowballed, with more than 160 nurses having done the course. The various programs are geared towards the potential of the individuals and include survival skills, communication and social skills. Program Director at Stockton Hospital, Mr. John Dewhurst.
It's for me, thank you. Hello.
Program Director at Stockton Hospital, Mr. John Dewhurst. John, what makes this program different from others that have been tried here at the hospital?
The main difference is the methodology and the ease of recording data. We've got an assessment form which is a behaviour checklist. Having used that checklist and found out where the training needs of the client are, you can then read off a program to teach that particular skill from the task analyses that have been compiled by teaching research. We then go through the cues and correction procedures, and the data, as I say, is very easy to record and very easy to update. So the basic principles that we're adopting are the same that we've been using along with everybody else who's working with severely handicapped children, but the methodology, the technology if you like, is where the exciting development is. Which has resulted in more progress.
Swordfish is a 21-metre cruiser on charter from Brisbane. She's been fitted with computer navigation and sounding equipment unique to this country. West Ham is proving to the Maritime Services Board that the dredging is in fact complete and to specification. Swordfish is fitted with a heave meter, which measures the swell at any location and compensates for the depth reading automatically. This means that accurate readings can be achieved outside the smooth water of the harbour. This is how a reading is taken. Navigation and computer locks onto a run line predetermined by east and north coordinates. The skipper then keeps that line. The depth sounder takes 10 readings per second for each location. This information is then mapped out through a computer to a printout to an accuracy within a few centimetres. Harbour channels have been dredged deeper at the edges than in the centre to allow large ships to roll from side to side without hitting bottom. The outside harbour is 18 metres deep, with the inside depth at 15.5 metres. The fruits of 5 years of labour will be seen this weekend when the Kashima Maru leaves Newcastle with a record load of coal of 102,000 tonnes.
Teams competing in the Bennett Marine Classic this weekend will be 7:30 on the Saturday night. The Kern Falcons will play Bankstown Bruins, and that'll be followed by another tough game with at 9 p.m. with Sydney City playing Canberra Cannons. It's a straight knockout. The Saturday night games are virtually semi-final, so the two winners will go to the final on 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon to fight out for the first position, and the losers will play for the third and fourth game at 1:30.
Every time we talk about the Falcons, we talk about George Morrow, Ian Davies and Donnie Ray Cruz. What about some of the other players? How are they performing so far?
They're performing very well, and I believe that they're playing more active parts in the game for Dan Riley over the last couple of years. And it's not because he slowed down, it's just that he's been out of the game. And Dan is training tremendously at the moment. Mike Johnson, of course, is in the starting lineup. Mike still regarded as one of the better shooters in the league, and I'm sure that he will make his mark this year.
Newcastlians were driven to see the famous singing duo in one of the biggest road lifts in the city's history. Muswellbrook organised the tour. Today's same numbers were restricted because of the unavailability of seats. Spirits were high for the fans already seated in the air-conditioned coaches, but those outside were playing a waiting game, hoping the next bus would be theirs. The buses with their weary passengers will return to Newcastle later.